Thank you, Martin, and good morning to everyone. We see global growth in 2016 as being modest, uneven, and with 4 downside risks. But it's up. I mean, we tend to forget that, as you said, Martin, from 3.1 in 2015, we see that 3.4 in 2016 and 3.6 in 2017. So there are factors that will actually increase the global value of our economies. Now, let me focus on the 4 risks that we see on the horizon. One is what I call the triple transition of the Chinese economy. And by triple transition, I mean moving from industry to service, from export to domestic market, and from, I always tend to forget the third one, so industry to service, export to domestic, and investment to consumption. Yeah. That's the triple transition that it's going through. It's a massive undertaking, and it's one where we forecasted China to be at 6.8 in 2015, they're at 6.9. So for those who pretend that they're very, very surprised about it, well, certainly it was expected. And we hope that the Chinese authorities will recognize the efforts that it takes to conduct those 3 transitions that they are determined to conduct, and that it will have an impact on the growth rate, and it will slow it down, which would be a good way to actually facilitate the transition and lower that first downside risk. The second downside risk is commodity prices, which have trended lower for the last 5 years, but where the lowering of prices have been accelerated, and certainly the perception of it has been accelerated in the last year and a half as a result of the oil prices, which is probably slightly going to improve as demand seems to improve a bit over the course of the last few months. To be seen, but still regarded as a downside risk. The third one is the asynchronous monetary policies conducted around the world, which entail quite a lot of flow of capitals from emerging and low-income countries to advanced economies, particularly the United States, and which entail, combined with the lower commodity prices, a significant exchange rate impact by way of depreciation on some of the emerging market economies. Just a quick word on those emerging market economies, if I may, Martin. Mm-hmm. They are different. We used to talk of the BRICS. I think it's not a fallacy, but the economic performance is vastly different. Whether you look at India, which is cruising at 7.5% and seems to be thriving, which is conducting some difficult reforms. China, which is gradually slowing down in hopefully a controlled way, with financial markets, by the way, which are extremely minute relative to the size of the overall Chinese economy. Russia and Brazil, which for different reasons are going to be in negative territory yet again this year. So complete different picture from the emerging market economies, which, I remind you, were the big drivers of growth and had been for the last 5 years or so. So the picture is changing, but you know, to be positive, the things that we feared a year ago would never happen, which have happened. Financing for development was agreed in Addis Ababa about 6 months ago. The Sustainable Development Goals were agreed in New York, which will entail significant change in the economies and hopefully in the policy decision-making, particularly in the low-income and emerging market economies, and COP21, which will also entail changes in our economies.
So, modest optimism, but significant risks. Yep. It's interesting, you didn't emphasize at all what you think might be happening in Europe. Are you just reasonably confident about the upswing there? Eurozone problems all resolved, as it were, Greek problem all resolved, and we can just put that to one side?
Well, I felt that I was talking too much from your body language, so I stopped on Europe.
No.
But,
always more, happy to have more.
Okay.
Within reason.
On Europe, the economy is certainly in a better shape. Our forecast for the Eurozone is 1.5, slightly lower than the Euro players themselves. We have 2 big concerns. One is better discussed, I think, by George, and that has to do with Brexit. and whether there is a deal to be had between the United Kingdom and other members of the European Union, which we hope very much, because it would really be conducive to more stability and a more cohesive economic zone. And the second is of a geopolitical nature. It's not directly economic, but it's economically related somehow. It's the refugee crisis, which is a bit of a make or break from my personal perspective, not the perspective of the IMF, because our IMF perspective on the refugee crisis is that if it is well handled, if the integration process is conducted in a cohesive and organized way, in the short, medium term, it's going to be an upside. And we figured that for the Eurozone, on average, it would be a plus 0.2% growth with uptick of up to 0.5% for countries like Germany or Sweden, which are the most likely to integrate refugees.
Do you actually think, can't resist it, that this is obviously your personal view, but you've raised it, that the refugee crisis, because we had a very similar view from Mark Rutte here just a few days ago, is sort of make or break for the survival of the whole Schengen area?
You know, again, I speak personally, not as MD of the IMF, but